Hello, I'm Jessica, and I hope you're doing okay. Today, I want to share something personal with you, something that's close to my heart. It's a story that I carry with me, a love story that's real, raw, and unforgettable. It's something I can never quite leave behind, and I hope you'll stay with me as I tell you, because I believe it's worth hearing. It all began when I was 22. I met Jackson, a guy who was 24 at the time. I still remember the first time I saw him. There was something magnetic about him. He had this confidence, a strong yet gentle presence, and these eyes that seemed to hold entire stories. His beard was perfectly groomed, and every time he spoke, I felt like I could listen forever. I thought, this is the kind of person you only meet in dreams. We first crossed paths at a friend's party. I was standing by myself, feeling a little out of place, when Jackson walked up to me with a warm, inviting smile. "Hey, I'm Jackson," he said, his voice calming and easy. We started talking, and before long, it felt like we'd known each other forever. The connection was instant, as though fate had drawn us together. We didn't exchange numbers that night, but the universe had a different plan. A few days later, we ran into each other at a bookstore. He waved, and we ended up spending hours together, discussing books and everything under the sun. And that's when the spark was lit. From that moment, we were more than just friends. We became the kind of friends who could talk about anything, no topic was off limits. Jackson had this incredible way of making me laugh until my cheeks hurt. He made everything feel exciting, even the most ordinary of moments. As time went on, I began to notice the little things, how his smile seemed to brighten when he looked at me, how he always checked in to make sure I was okay, how his gaze lingered a little longer than it should. That's when I realized it wasn't just friendship anymore. I had feelings for him. And to my surprise, I learned he felt the same way. One evening, as we were walking through the park, Jackson stopped and turned to face me. He looked me in the eyes and said, "Jessica, I think I'm falling for you." My heart skipped a beat. "I feel the same way," I whispered back, and from that moment on, everything changed. We started dating, and those days with Jackson were the happiest I've ever had. We shared everything: movies, binge-watching TV shows, dancing around the living room, laughing until we were breathless. One of my fondest memories was our first date. Jackson took me to this cozy little restaurant, and afterward, we walked along the beach. He held my hand for the first time, and under the moonlight, I felt like the only person in the world. Jackson was everything. Handsome, kind, funny, and always thoughtful. He made me feel special, like I was cherished. He called me beautiful girl, leave little notes that said things like, "You light up my world," or "I'm so lucky to have you." One evening, while we were sitting in his car, he looked at me and said, "Jessica, I want to marry you someday. I want to build a life with you, have kids, a house full of love. I want to grow old with you." Those words meant the world to me, and I started picturing a future with him, waking up beside him, traveling together, and building a life that was all our own. For his birthday, I wanted to do something special, something that would show him how much he meant to me. Jackson loved surprises, so I decided to write him a letter, pouring all my feelings into it. When I handed it to him, his eyes filled with tears, and he pulled me into his arms. You're the best woman in the world, he whispered. I don't know what I did to deserve you. Life felt perfect. Every moment with Jackson was like a dream come true. Whether we were on an adventure or just sitting in the quiet of our home, everything felt right because we had each other. But life, as it often does, had other plans. There came a twist, a moment that would change everything. Growing up, my dad always told me, one day, you'll meet someone who makes you feel like you're the only person in the world. Someone who loves you for who you are. I didn't fully understand what he meant until I met Jackson. With him, everything felt aligned, as though the universe had brought us together. We were perfectly in tune. I introduced him to my parents, and they immediately took a liking to him. Even my dad, who's usually tough on people, said to me, "You've found someone who truly cares for you. Don't let go of him." We talked about everything, the future we'd build, the life we'd share, the little details. And then, one day, Jackson said, "I need to visit my parents. It's been a while. But when I get back, we'll talk about taking the next step." I was overjoyed. A wedding. A future together. It all felt so close, so real. The day he left, he kissed me softly and whispered, "I'll be back soon. Wait for me." "I'll be here," I promised, not knowing that those would be the last words we'd ever share. Jackson never came back. It was a regular afternoon when I got the call. I had just returned from running errands. The sun was shining, the world was moving along like any other day, when my phone rang. I answered, thinking it was just a wrong number. But the voice on the other end said, "This is the police." "Are you Jessica? We have some news about Jackson." And in that moment, my entire world came crashing down. The world seemed to stop. My heart plummeted, and my breath caught in my chest. The trembling in my hands was uncontrollable, as I could hardly grasp what the officer was saying. "Yes," I managed to whisper, barely above a breath. The words blurred into a fog, but one sentence pierced through it all. "There's been an accident. Jackson didn't make it." The ground beneath me gave way. Everything became silent, distant. My fingers slipped from the phone, and it dropped to the floor, as if I was too heavy to hold it any longer. My chest felt like it was caving in on itself, and I couldn't move. I couldn't think. It felt like my entire existence had crumbled. My father rushed to me, his hands reaching out, but I was lost in the space between those words and the world that no longer made sense. I screamed. I cried. I begged, desperate for someone to tell me this wasn't real, that it was all some kind of nightmare I would wake up from. My father took the phone. His face drained of color, and the words echoed in my mind but didn't register. I don't remember anything after that. The only thing that remains is his arms around me, holding me as I cried, an ache that felt like it would never end. That day was the beginning of something I couldn't comprehend. I locked myself away, retreating to the silence of my room. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The grief twisted inside me, making everything feel impossible. My thoughts circled like a storm, endless and painful. Why him? Why us? What did we do to deserve this? The emptiness inside me threatened to swallow everything I had once been. My parents tried their best, but it was as if nothing could reach me. My father, always the one with the comforting words, sat quietly beside me, unable to fix what couldn't be fixed. I was lost in memories that never stopped haunting me. Then, one day, my mother found me sitting alone, clutching a picture of Jackson, the image of happier times. She knelt beside me, taking my hand softly. "Jessica, you need help. You can't keep living like this," she said, her voice gentle but firm. They took me to see a doctor, and after hours of struggling to articulate the weight in my chest, I was diagnosed with depression. Therapy was a battle in itself, an endless back and forth with a pain that felt like it would swallow me whole. There were nights I sat staring out the window, tears streaming down my face, asking the void, why? Wondering if I would ever find my way back. Jackson was everywhere. Every place I went, the bookstore where we met, the park where he'd first said he loved me, it all felt like remnants of a life that had been stolen from me. The pain was overwhelming, suffocating, and I couldn't understand how to exist without him. But over time, with therapy and the constant love of my parents, I began to move forward. Slowly. It wasn't easy, and some days it felt like I was wandering in the dark. But I knew, deep down, that Jackson wouldn't want me to give up. He always believed in me, and I couldn't let his belief in me be lost. Now, at 32, I've built a life that looks put together from the outside. I work hard, I'm healthy, and I have the support of my family. But in the quiet moments, I still carry Jackson with me. His memory is woven into the corners of my heart, the places where I thought I could bury my pain. Though I've healed in many ways, the scar remains. And there's a part of me, deep inside, that's afraid. I'm terrified to love again. Jackson wasn't just my soulmate, he was my best friend, my partner, the one I imagined a future with. He was the dream I clung to, and when he promised me he would always be there, I believed it. But he's gone, and with him, so did that future. It's been 10 years, but sometimes I still hear his voice in my mind. Sometimes I close my eyes and almost feel him near me. And for a fleeting moment, I believe he's still here. But then I open my eyes, and the weight of reality hits me, he's gone. And I'm left with memories and a heart that's afraid to open to anyone else. My parents, well-meaning as always, tell me, you need to move on. You deserve love and happiness. But how can I explain that the fear of losing someone again is stronger than any hope of moving on? Every time I consider opening my heart to someone new, the fear paralyzes me. How could I ever trust again after everything Jackson and I shared? How could I open myself to that kind of loss? I've tried. I've gone on dates, tried to let someone else in. But it's like there's a wall inside me that won't come down, a barrier I can't tear through. The thought of being hurt again holds me back. And then, in the quiet moments, the promise Jackson made to me haunts me. I'll always love you, he said. I'll always come back. But he didn't. And part of me can't shake the feeling that he lied. Not by choice, I know. But it's hard not to feel betrayed when you've held on to a promise that was never kept. I loved Jackson more than I ever thought I could love anyone. Our bond was more than just affection, it was a deep, unbreakable connection. And I know that kind of love doesn't disappear. It stays with you, always. It becomes a part of you. Even now, as I continue to live without him, I carry a piece of him within me. Sometimes, it feels like time stands still. Some days, I wake up and for a brief moment, I think maybe the pain is gone. Maybe everything will be okay. But then I remember that he's gone, and the world feels empty again. But in this silence, I've learned something important. I've learned that my love for Jackson doesn't fade. It's a part of me, woven into who I am. And while it's painful, I understand now that it doesn't need to go away. I don't need someone new to fill the space he left. The love we shared, it was enough. And I'm learning to live with it. I don't need to replace him. I don't need to force my heart to move on just because the world tells me to. The love we had is mine to carry. No one can take that away. It was a love unlike any other, and it will always be a part of me. Maybe someday I'll be ready to love again. But for now, I'm content to honor the love I had with Jackson, to cherish it without needing anything else. It was pure, it was real, and it will never fade. And that, in itself, is enough.